Perfect. First of all, thank you all for taking the time, whether it's morning, midday, or afternoon, to join us. I know this topic of M&A is very top of mind for many of us, so appreciate you taking the time to join. How to realize the revenue potential of add-on acquisitions. My name is Lauren Goldstein. I'm the private equity practice lead at Winning by Design, and come to the organization with a 30-year background in B2B technology, both on sales and on marketing, and excited to be here with three of my colleagues, and I'll let them each introduce themselves really quickly, and then we will jump in. Rowie, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Roy Atuv. I'm a growth architect at Winning by Design. I focus mostly on the left side of the bow tie, which means I'm focusing on the acquisition part, so sales and marketing. That's my background before joining Winning by Design.
Fantastic. Victor?
Excellent. So my name is Victor Defrier. I am an MD at Winning by Design based out of New York, as Lauren shared. My focus has been on helping our clients figure out how to transform their organizations in a repeatable and scalable way. And a lot of the inspiration for this webinar came from a lot of work that we've been doing recently with clients and helping them navigate the challenges of integrating complex products together. And so really excited to share some of those best practices today.
And
David?
my name is David Ellen. I'm a revenue architect focused on customer success. So that's the right side of our bow tie. I work with everything related to closed won and beyond, customer engagement, voice of the customer programs, customer journeys, all things related to customers.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Victor, in the spirit of being the driver of the deck, let's advance. So I think Victor actually said it best. When you're in an organization like Winning by Design, who's working with dozens, if not hundreds of B2B SaaS companies, you start to pick up on what's happening in the market really, really quickly and start to see patterns in how to help these organizations be successful. And that really was the growth catalyst or the driver for us wanting to get this group together to not only share what we're seeing, but also hear some of the challenges or success levers that you're seeing. So please feel free to chime in. I think a lot of this data that we've put on this slide, which by the way, feel free to screenshot it. This is data that's publicly available. I'm happy to share it and pass it along later. But with all of the challenges in the market, with tech valuations low, it's definitely a ripe opportunity for M&A happening. We see, for instance, and again, this is a well-known data point, that the 77% of PE deals right now are M&A. So again, we're seeing a lot of organizations coming together because the business sense makes good. But, and if you want to advance, one of the challenges of bringing a lot of disparate organizations together is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to do it right and to really make that add-on or integration successful. So, some of the use cases that we are seeing most frequently are, for instance, they're buying in organizations or companies or products that are helping them go up market or go down market, or shift from perhaps a single product to an entire platform. Be able to expand within a customer base, whether it's into different departments within an organization or different buying centers. And then of course, global expansion is another really good use case that we've seen. So, definitely, for the financial folks that are on the phone, you see what the big opportunities are. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide, Victor. The agenda today is to get into like the reality of it. So great, we know on paper, again, especially for the investors or the finance folks on the phone, like, yes, we should be doing it, but it's hard. And so we're going to explore part of why we see that it's hard, how to get it right, and actually walk you through a case study of an organization that we've worked closely with that's really doing it right. And in that, you'll get some really good recommendations of frameworks and ways to ensure that when you're bringing the organizations together, that it doesn't just look good on paper, but that it actually looks good in successfully growing all the parties involved. So with that being said, Victor, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So what have we seen happen when these integrations go wrong? So the first observation is usually that there are mismatched go-to-market strategies. And so if the organization has, for instance, or the platform organization has been selling, a mid-market product or an enterprise product, and then some of the acquisitions are more targeted towards, a different segment of the market, those call for different structures, different skill sets, different processes. And so assuming that you can just kind of merge one sales organization into another and one go-to-market strategy into another has proven to be a real challenge. Another issue that we see is that, folks are not really approaching this with structure. Oftentimes there's an executive leadership team that has some experience with bringing new products and services to market, but they're kind of relying on their experience, which, but while significant, maybe is not, doesn't reflect kind of industry-wide best practices. So the kind of observations that you would have as an organization like Winning by Design, where you see these things time and time again. And so as a result, we've built frameworks and that help expedite the acceleration of these integrations. And so approaching them without any sort of structure or framework leads to delay. Finally, or I should say, the org design piece is also really important. But it's only part of the solution. So we find that a lot of organizations want to dive right into org design without really thinking about the tasks that are necessary and they're called for selling the different products, and also mismanagement in their customer journey. Another easy example to highlight this is, again, the difference between enterprise and a mid-market sale. Right? Customers are going to go through a different journey. And so assuming that what has been true to sell the initial product is true to sell the new product is often a mistake. So these are some of the challenges that we've seen in add-ons in general. Now let's talk about the expansion add-on, because this is probably the most common use case, right? A big part of the thesis behind these transactions is that we're going to grab a greater share of wallet from existing customers and strengthen our, grab market share. But unfortunately, these expansion add-ons also create their own issues. So first of all, it's new value propositions, right? So you have a team that maybe is used to expanding the core product, but now they have to be able to articulate the pains, the impacts, the business goals, the critical events that could create urgency. And so making sure that the team is well educated on the right value prop is essential. Then decision process, right? And so again, especially, and we could talk more about this shortly in the case study, but if you are selling a product to the same group of buyers, that's a lot easier than if you have to sell to new groups of buyers within the same account. And so that's going to call for a different decision-making process with everybody having their own new priorities. The team needs to be skilled up in all of that. Clear handoffs, new roles that may be necessary with the integration of these organizations, and then making sure that handoffs are clear, because when things fall through the cracks, that's where customers get upset. And we need to make sure that the entire organization is now a smooth, well-oiled machine, as opposed to, kind of siloed. And then finally, the last one that, frequently comes up has to do with the poor implementation strategy. And so we're going to talk a lot more about this towards the end, but these transactions are really transformations of your revenue organization. And so as a result, they require a lot of thoughtful implementation and well-structured implementation, which we'll share more about later. So yeah, the big takeaway for all of this, I think, is that this is a true business transformation. This isn't just something that, because the numbers work on paper, they will automatically become true in reality. I always like to, talk to customers and emphasize for them that what we're trying to do here is drive behavior change, right? We have new skills that need to be taught. We need to teach old dogs new tricks. And as a result of that, that's going to require sustained training and coaching and reinforcement and strategy to make it a reality. And so that if there's anything that you take away from today, it's to really think about these as true business transformations and not just one-off engagements. So what have we found is the best way to approach this? And this is really going to be the context or the wrapper around which a lot of what we're going to share with you guys today. And that is this, 5-step process that we've embraced here at Winning by Design, and we find to be very effective at executing these transformations. So it all starts with some sort of discovery where we're trying to define the strategy, understanding who are these products sold to, are they cross-sells and upsells, and what are the key metrics that we need to hit to be able to achieve our growth targets. Based off of that, we'll be able to design new processes and messaging and organizational structures that are aligned towards delivering the complete package of products. Then we need to roll out these new behaviors and processes into playbooks and into the daily workflow of the team, including their tech stack. Then we need to train the team, right? So they need to learn those new skills. And we're going to talk a little bit about what type of training is most effective for skill development later. And then finally, as I said a few minutes ago, this is all about behavior change. The way that most of us are successful in changing behavior is when we have strong coaches to help guide us through the process and help reinforce those new behaviors. And the same is true here. To make these transformations effective, we need to have clarity as to what the reinforcement and coaching plan will be at the very end. And we're going to share a little bit more about each of these as we go throughout the rest of today's presentation. So handing it over to you, David, to start us down the road of this case study.
And really quickly, if I can just chime in, David, before you jump in, we've got chat open. So if there's questions that are popping up, please feel free to drop them into chat, especially as we start to get into some of the nuances. Sorry to cut you off, David. Take it away.
No worries. So if you're familiar at all with Winning by Design, you know that we always start with SPICE, with the situation, pain, and the desired impact that our client is looking to achieve, something that every organization should be doing. So I'll give you a very high level overview of this particular client. They are a highly successful PE-backed company. They had a single product, and with the acquisitions that they did, they became a multi-product company. They were very commercially centric. Because they were a single product company, they really didn't have any upsells or cross-sells. So the AE that sold the deal owned the deal. They ate what they killed and they retained that customer. And there really wasn't much of a concept of customer relationship management because they had already bought the product and there was really nothing else they could buy. So that was the situation, realizing that they were then going to move into a situation where they had other products now that their existing customers could buy. So some of the pains that they had is they had no defined customer journey. There were no standardized processes. They really didn't understand the impact that customers received from their products because it was a one-time sale, and once they made the sale, that was basically done. That all changed when they became a multi-client, a multi-product company. They also, because the executive team came primarily from sales and sales leadership, they really didn't have a concept of what customer success looked like. How do you work with customers to make sure they're being successful with your product? We then asked them what impact they wanted to achieve. And so they wanted to make sure that they integrated the 5 products that they had into a single platform. They wanted to identify the right go-to-market strategy for a multi-product instead of a single product company. They wanted to look at their organizations, both on the left side of the bow tie in sales and marketing and on the right side of the bow tie, and make sure that the org structures and the comp plans were aligned to what they wanted to achieve. And then they wanted to figure out how to build that cross-sell motion into their customer base. So let's move on to the next slide, talk specifically about the process. So we have a discovery process and we have a design process, as Victor pointed out before. In the discovery process, we have two main pieces of functionality that we do. We conduct executive interviews, and the goal in the executive interviews is really to jump into their situation a little bit deeper, ask them some questions about the situation and the pain that they're having, look at the customer journey, begin to start using the common language of SPICE that we use across the bow tie, and ask them questions that uncover where they are and get a little bit deeper into what some of their challenges are. So we ask those questions, and then we understand the current state between the companies that they have, the products that they now have, and we start to imagine the future. The second thing that we do is we do an abbreviated diagnostic, and our diagnostic takes a look at the data that they have along the bow tie. So we're looking at things like closed rates and renewal rates and expansion rates and things like that. And that gives us a good picture of what's actually happening. So between the executive interviews and the diagnostics, that concluded our discovery stage. Then we start moving into design. And in design, we created a series of well-orchestrated workshops, and the workshops were prioritized by the information that we got in the executive interviews, talking about what matters most, what are the things that have to happen before other things can happen. And one of the things that we found during the discovery phase was that there was some significant misalignment or disagreements among the executive team on how they should proceed because of the different perspectives they brought to the table. And what that tends to do is it delays decision-making and it delays the implementation of a solution. It can also decrease investor confidence if they can't keep that within themselves. So these 5 executive workshops were done in collaboration with were designed in collaboration with the executive team and put in a priority that they really thought would give them some quick wins very quickly. Let's jump into each of these for just a second. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to validate and prioritize what they were doing. Then we wanted to give them an introduction and an education to what customer success looked like, right? How do you engage with customers so that you're building confidence, you're becoming a trusted advisor, you're setting yourself up to show them the impact that they can get from their products. So you have the ability, you've earned the right to expand them and cross-sell them into some of your other products. Then we looked at their sales organization and lead generation processes and what the left-hand side of the bow tie looked like. And then finally, in our 5th workshop, we pulled it all together and we sat with the client and talked about, all right, what are your action items? What are the next steps? We made sure that all of the executives on the team were aligned appropriately, and we validated exactly what they were going to do. So in terms of keys to success, we wanted to make sure that we defined the customer journey. The executive team now understood the key moments that mattered to customers. Then we defined the tasks that were associated with those key moments, right? What are the things a CSM or an account manager has to do to make sure those key moments, they're shining in those key moments? And then lastly, we look at the org design. So that's the direction that we went in with them. Let's go to the next slide. And in the next slide, what we learned was, as I mentioned before, there was a lack of strategic alignment in the executive team, right? You have to build that executive alignment before you can move forward. Because if you don't get everybody on board moving in the right direction. The average revenue per unit varied greatly between their products. So if you have a product that sells for $1,000 and you have another product that sells for $25,000, that impacts the go-to-market strategy you have and the motions that you do in your lead generation and then your ability to close those sales. We talked to them about whether a single product would be sort of that beachfront, that lead product that they want all of their customers to have and then use the other 4 products as upsells, or whether a customer could come in and start with any of the products and move from one product to another. That was really important because that helps determine what lead generation looks like and what the organizational structure is going to look like. And then we found out that we really needed to do that deeper dive into customer success because they didn't understand what customer relationship management looked like. So as we go into the customer success piece, what we did first is we gave them a high-level introduction into customer success. A lot of people think of customer success as a department, and they don't necessarily think of it as a go-to-market methodology, right? A series of things that we have to do to become that client's trusted advisor. So we gave them that overview. We identified the main stages, the key stages of their customer journey and the key moments that mattered. And when you think about a customer journey, there may be a lot of different things that you have to do when you engage with a customer, but there's only a few key moments that you really have to knock out of the ballpark. And it was really important for the executive team to understand what those key moments were and be able to capitalize with on them with the right org structure, with the right processes, and with the right comp plan, because the comp plan dictates where people are going to spend their time. So after that, we talked about building out their org structure. And as we started with the org structure, it's important to realize that customer success isn't a one-size-fits-all. There's not a one-size customer success organization that works for all organizational structures. So we presented them initially with 3 different potential org structures, talked through the pros and cons of each of these org structures, and then gave them the ability to focus in on one that they could align on that they thought would fit their business, their products, and their go-to-market strategy. So this is what their pre-acquisition org structure looked like. They had an account manager that sold the business, owned the business, and really had no concept of customer relationship management. And they were supported by what they called a customer success manager, whose only role was to do onboarding. No other relationship manager at all. They had a support team that handled technical support, and they had a solution engineer that the account manager could utilize as a subject matter expert for product knowledge. As we look at the next slide, we can look at how their organizational structure changed for post-acquisition, now in a multi-product focus. We shifted ownership of the account of the client to a customer success manager, right? Somebody that has the skills to do long-term relationship management, focus on customer-centric, having customer-centric conversations. They're product agnostic. They're responsible for onboarding, engagement, working with the client to understand the impact that they're achieving from the product, and then also generating leads for expansion and cross-sell. And then we had the account manager take a step into more of an expansion role without the focus of doing all of the customer engagement, and working in strong collaboration with the CSM on what it will take to cross-sell, upsell, and expand the customer. Then we aligned the solutions that, well, let's go back for just a second. Then we aligned the solutions engineer to the account manager so that the solutions engineer can be that product-specific SME that could do the demos and bring all of the right information for each of the products to that knowledge and the customer relationship with the account manager. Okay, so let's go to 21. We came up with 3 different core skills that we felt in their transition that each of the team members needed to understand. I'm not going to go into detail in these. You'll get these, you'll be able to see them. But the first one was managing customer meetings, right? As you start thinking about building a long-term relationship with a customer, you now have to think about building the relationship in a series of meetings and what you want to accomplish, identifying additional situations, right? New types of pains, right? Validating the impact that customers are getting. And these have to be well orchestrated in a series of customer meetings. So we built some skill sets around this one. In the second core skill, we wanted to make sure that the team really understood how to diagnose new pain, new use cases, because now that they had 5 different products, there were multiple use cases out there that each customer could have potentially where they would need one of the other solutions. So we wanted to make sure that they understood this. And then the third skill set was understanding how to navigate an organization. One of the challenges that a lot of companies make, one of the mistakes a lot of companies make, is they get very single-threaded with their key stakeholders. And when you start thinking about having a multi-product solution, and as Victor said earlier in the conversation, you might have different decision makers, a different decision-making process. You might have influencers, you might have an economic buyer. It's really important to know how to navigate the organization and make sure you're now aligning with multiple stakeholders and then utilizing them to help sell with you internally within their customer, within their company. So now let's move to the left side, go back to the left side of the bow tie, and I'll turn it over to Rowie.
Yeah, David, before I take over, maybe it's worth sharing why we chose to focus on customer success first with this account. So do you mind explaining why we chose to focus on the customer success first and then only sales?
Sure. Yeah. Because most of the leadership team came from the sales environment, they understood prospecting, they understood lead generation, right? They had, for the one product that they had a very well-oiled motion. As I mentioned before, they're a highly successful company in their own right. So they were doing a lot of things the right way. Where they really struggled was by not having an expansion motion and not understanding how to build relationships, long-term relationships with their customers, they really didn't know how to engage. And they didn't understand what customer success was. So that's the reason why we spent so much time in customer success. It was really important for them to understand, hey, we've got to build a relationship. We've got to become a trusted advisor. We have to make sure that we earn the right to expand them. And that means we have to show them that that we're delivering impact and value from the products that we had. And this was a big gap within their company. So that's why we chose to focus there.
All right. And then we took over and we focused on the acquisition part, the sales part. There, again, we started by identifying the customer journey or the acquisition process, focusing on what we call the left side. Of course, they had their main product, which was selling for $25,000 a year, and then the smaller deals, which was easy to answer. Are we leading with one product and then expanding to additional products, or are we selling all products at the same time? And of course, you can already understand that based on the ACV, we decided to go with one product and then focus on expanding the others, which then we went and revisited the ICP and personas. Are we still selling to the same people? Are we still targeting the same people? And what happens there post acquisition? So after we close the initial product, who else do we need to focus on? Once we did that, for those of you who are familiar with Winning by Design growth formula, it's a tool, it's a framework that helps us identify, plan the resources that we need to have in place in order to reach our goals. So we defined that growth formula from a single product to multiple product and how we expand that. So we created that and started to identify and create that organizational structure. By the way, we did discover that we need to move some of our sellers from the acquisition part of the bow tie into customer success and the expansion, focusing on expansion. So we did that. And we created a new organization structure with, again, the new people that joined the main company, created a new RACI model, and then align that to the multiple products. And of course, once you go from selling 1 to 5 products, that's what they did in the course of the last 18 months. you start to have people that are experts in specific products, and you start to have generalists. So the solution engineer, the sales engineer, they need to upsell their skill and their knowledge on the multiple products. And of course, when we defined the organizational structure and we defined the RACI, we went back and redefined the KPIs and the comp plans for the rest of the team. And then we looked at, again, the same kind of pod structure that we did for the left side for the customer success or support. Now let's do that on the acquisition part. One AE or 2 or 3 AEs, how much resources did they need in order to support them? What are the solution engineers? How many solution engineers we need to have in order to support that sales process? So we also did this analysis and realigned everything to support that play as well. The third workshop was around lead generation. How do we do lead generation? And you can already understand that we understand that the biggest impact or potential for this company was to sell multiple products to the same customer base. So we agreed with the executive team that the lead generation is going to focus on the existing client base. Their total addressable market, David, correct me if I'm wrong, was 8,000 companies all over North America. That was their total addressable market. That was what they were focused on. They had their main product was selling already to 2,000. And the small acquisitions also gave them a few more existing clients. We defined that they are going to focus on that client base in the next 12 months. So how do we align the marketing and the account management team to actually target those accounts? And you can see here examples of the white spacing example that we did. So we took their list of customers and started to do white spacing. White spacing is a framework that we use in order to uncover opportunities for expansion. Once we identified the top or the most ready accounts to engage with, we started to do account planning and relationship mapping based on the ICPs that we defined. So we basically built a lead generation process there. And then the last workshop was just to validate, align, and create an action plan. So this is what we did, like just to summarize our entire process with them. So first of all, as David mentioned, our biggest achievement there was to align the executive team on that mind change from the commercial, very sales focused into a customer centric, because again, the potential, the growth of the company will come from selling those additional products to their existing client base. Then we prioritized the key areas for improvements. We defined both the sales and customer success org structure to represent the new customer journey, starting points for the sales and customer success comp plans, and revisited the lead generation process. We created an action plan for them, and now, you know, our champion there said, "Hey, I now have a 12 months plan that I can just orchestrate and actually roll out." So it started off with communicating the action plan to all the organization, the different sellers, the customer success, and making sure that everybody knows their position within the new org. We redefined the impact that we want to achieve from each product, and then started to educate the different team members on that potential impact. We defined the ideal customer journey for that multiple product process, standardizes the process, identify the key team players that we need to move around and to make sure that everybody finds their position in the new org chart. As Victor said, identifying those skills that we need to now train on. Yes, a lot of that was just to train on the new products that they acquired, but also, hey, how do you now, from selling one product and then basically just waiting for the renewal, how do you maintain that relationship and identify expansion opportunities? Implemented KPIs, started to measure that, and of course, introduced a improvement process that they can actually follow up on and constantly improve over time. Victor, over to you.
All right. So before I kind of tie everything up together in a bow, and I want to just revisit one thing that was already said and reemphasize it. So we've talked to Rowie and David have talked a lot about executive alignment. In my experience, this is an absolutely essential step, and one that creates a lot of opportunity for delay and ultimately failure of these plans. You know, I'm thinking about an example of a recent customer where they had there was a lot of debate about how to execute on the cross-sell motion. They left it in the hands of a CS leader who didn't really have that much experience, and it took about 18 months until they realized we're not executing on this thesis that's so essential to success. And for the PE folks in the room, I'm sure that delay has a big impact on your holding period. And so one of the biggest areas of where these integrations break down is that lack of executive alignment, because once you have that, then you can execute pretty quickly on the rest of it. And then the second area where things tend to break down are in the ideas that I'm about to share with you right now around implementation. And so let's start with process design and activation. And so David and Rowie have shared with you about the need to organize the organization, figure out roles and responsibilities, and then think about what are the tasks that these folks need to do on a day-to-day basis. Those tasks are laid out usually in our in Winning by Design's approach in what we call playbooks. And so these playbooks exist throughout the entire bow tie. I know we've used that phrase for those who aren't familiar with the bow tie. You're seeing an example of it in front of you. On the right side of the bow tie is the customer success, and on the left side is more sales. And you can see, demand gen, prospecting, closing, and then on the customer success side, everything from onboarding all the way through expansion. What really matters for these playbooks is that you identify the most important moments in that customer's life cycle, that customer journey, and then make sure that the team has what we call turn-by-turn direction for exactly how to execute at these key moments, because we don't want to leave things to chance. It can't just be like, have an open-ended conversation with this buyer persona about this topic. Instead, it has to be, open your conversation this way, ask these specific questions. If everything goes well, they will say this, and then the next step in the process is X, Y, and Z. And so documenting processes and playbooks is really essential, but most important is that we include what we call turn-by-turn directions so that the team knows exactly what they need to do to be successful. Another key point of alignment and driving consistency is also around messaging. We talked a little bit already about the potential that we're going to be selling new products to different decision-making teams, right? And so different personas. And if your reps, whether they're on sales or customer success, aren't used to having those conversations with those personas, then they need to be skilled up as quickly as possible. And again, just like with the process design, messaging design is all about turn-by-turn directions. When you're having a conversation with this particular persona, these are the topics that they care about. These are questions you can ask to communicate, to get them to open up about those topics. These are stories you can tell. There are best case studies that really tend to resonate with this persona. So getting all of those documented and providing them to your team in detailed direction is really essential. Then we want to make sure that these best practice processes are reinforced. And a lot of that is about building them into your tech stack so that you can, those best practices, the team is returning to them on a regular basis and they're reinforced. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the most straightforward example is required fields in your CRM. If we decide that discovery or qualification requires having a conversation with a particular persona on a particular business topic, then we need to make sure that the CRM requires that, you know, that information is inputted into the CRM before a deal is advanced to the next stage. And so technology plays a really big role in reinforcing the behaviors that we want. Then we need to train the team, right? And so, you know, at a very high level, our biggest lesson on training is that the way that we have all been taught to learn throughout our entire lives is wrong, right? We can watch all the YouTube videos and listen to all the lectures in the world, read the best books in the world, but at the end of the day, we're talking about behavior change here. And for reps to adopt new behaviors and new skills, the best way for them to do so is through practical, hands-on, on-the-job experience. So it's not enough to say, you know, here's how you have a conversation with this persona. We also have to, you know, talk about, prepare for specific calls that are in their pipeline with those personas, working with the managers to help them prepare. We need to record those calls and share the feedback across the team so that they can hear good examples and not so good examples and learn from each other. And so the typical classroom approach to training and skill development that we all learn in high school and college and et cetera, that's usually not enough. That's why none of us remember most of the stuff that we learned throughout high school and college. It's all about that hands-on, practical, peer-to-peer and on-the-job experience. That's what a truly successful training looks like that drives behavior change. And then finally, coaching and reinforcement. You know, without having an effective coach and without having a manager that's going to be able to guide the reps and help them deal with issues as they come up and avoid problems, it's going to be too easy for reps to fall back on old behaviors. And so almost, I think we're at the point now where we're almost insisting that we start with the managers first with a lot of these projects to make sure that they know how to coach and what to coach to reinforce these behaviors that we want to make stick. One of the frameworks that we use at Winning by Design that we try to teach managers is a framework called REX. It stands for results, effort, knowledge, and skills. And so this is a way that the managers can diagnose the individual issues of a rep, right? So are they achieving the right results? If they are, great, that's the end of the analysis. If they aren't achieving the results, then there's a question of, is it an effort issue? Do they know the volume of calls that they need to make, the number of discovery calls that they need to hit their number? If they aren't hitting those effort metrics, then that's the first place to start. Then there's knowledge and skills. So if they are doing the right things at the right volumes, but they're not getting the results, is it a knowledge issue? Do they know what a good QBR looks like, what a good discovery call looks like? And then finally, skills. Do they have the practice in delivering these stories, having these conversations so that they become second nature? That's what a lot of this coaching and reinforcement is all about, is practical opportunities to reinforce these best practices and making sure that they become sticky so that you can actually realize the full potential of the acquisition that kind of is the motivation for all of this. Last point I want to make, and that is constantly tracking and measuring success. And so one thing that we encourage all of our clients to do is set up an impact office, and we help them to set it up and hold their hand in the initial phases. But ultimately, this needs to be a built-in process for the organization. You need to be constantly looking at your results to make sure that you are on track to achieve the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. If you're falling short of that, then we need to be able to identify the skill gaps that are necessary to address those KPI challenges, and then put in place the right training, coaching, reinforcement, enablement if necessary, to make sure that we address those skill gaps. Revenue is a lagging indicator. And so we want to make sure that we are we have the right KPIs in place. We're tracking those leading indicators and able to intervene before, you know, it's December and we realize we're going to miss our number. There's more that we can do before that to make sure that we're on track. And so that's really, you know, kind of the summary of the implementation piece of this. Like I said before, you know, the strategy and alignment at the executive level, that's, you know, where a lot of projects like this go to die. So that's always the first step. Once that alignment is there, the design of playbooks and processes and messaging is more straightforward. But then we also need to make sure that this implementation stuff sticks as well. And I would say the biggest and most important part of that is that manager coaching and reinforcement, because without them, it's way too easy for reps to fall back on old behaviors, and you will not realize the potential of the acquisition, the greater share of wallet, whatever the thesis happens to be. So that's all we have at a high level for today. Lauren, I'm going to hand it back to you to kind of make sure that we highlight the most important points for the audience to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, actually, I think, Victor, you did a beautiful job summarizing, and I'm going to suggest that we kind of continue forward and make sure that we have a few moments just to share some additional resources with this awesome audience, and then also to make time for Q&A. So yeah, I mean, Victor, I think you summarized it beautifully. It's about fundamentals, it's about alignment, it's about coaching, and ultimately making it stick. If you'll just go back for a second, sorry, advance one, please. There are additional resources where you can get great content like this. We do have a newsletter, a research newsletter. Please make sure to sign up for it. For those that are on the investor or PE or VC side, I also have a separate newsletter that I send out. Please send me a note, Lauren@winningbydesign.com, if you'd like to get added to that. And please join us for additional workshops. And with that, I think, gentlemen, we have hit our timing perfectly. We may even be a minute ahead of time. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. I know that, Brett, I saw in the chat that you were asking about, you know, what are the moments that matter? Just want to bring that up to this group and have Rowie, you and David just chime in with your response to that as we kick off the Q&A.
I think Rowie put a couple of good examples in, and then I added one example in there. You know, it's what's important to understand is that the customer journey has a lot of touch points for each customer. There are going to be emails, there are going to be interactions with the product, with the website, with the account manager, with the CSM, right? Not every one of those moments is a critical moment that you have to hit out of the ballpark. But some of them are. Some of them are the ones that the customer is going to remember, right? As Rowie said, having a good discovery call, the customer is going to walk away with an aha moment that they learned something about their business and their pain and their situation that they shared that they realized they have to have a solution for, right? Starting onboarding on the right foot, getting people excited, getting them engaged, that's absolutely critical. Going into the renewal, right? You might have 5 or 6 different conversations with the customer about renewal along the life cycle of the first year of the customer journey, but really having the right renewal conversation at the right time is critical. And then if you're going to do a business review, whether it's a quarterly business review with the business users or the technical people, or an executive business review with the senior executives, right? Making sure you're delivering value to them during that conversation, making sure you're validating the impact that their team and their company has been getting, right? Illustrating what your products are doing for them. That's an absolutely critical moment. If you don't bring value in those moments, your customers are going to stop engaging, and you're eventually going to chalk them up to some churn. Rowie, anything I missed?
No, I just coming back to the renewal. And I like when you always say that renewal, if you do your job correctly as a CS, renewal by itself is not a moment that matters. So yeah, you focus on the impact throughout the contract length, and then renewal is just
another day in the life of the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing to that. So the moments that matter on the sales side, which is more my expertise than CS, are going to differ from company to company and from go-to-market strategy from one to the other, right? Again, high velocity versus mid-market versus enterprise, PLG. They're going to have slightly different key moments, but we can easily identify them. And so what matters is figuring out what are those moments that matter in your sales process. So qualification, that first call, prospecting. Let's start with prospecting, right? What messages need to be out there to attract folks to have a meeting with your sales team? Qualification, how do we make sure that we're only entering the best opportunities into the pipeline? Discovery, then ultimately, building a business case, maybe an executive stakeholder meeting, putting together a proposal. These are distinct moments that are make or break, move or step back in the sales process. And so we need to make sure that we have identified them and that we've put processes in place with turn-by-turn direction so that the team knows exactly what to do at each of these key moments. So it's less about identifying one standard set of key moments throughout every organization, but more the practice of figuring out what moments matter to advancing your deals and then optimizing those moments through metrics and then training the team.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I see maybe another question popped in. And actually, really quickly, Brett, did that answer your question?
Yeah, so the way I'm kind of filing it away, there are life cycle stages. Within each life cycle stage, there are moments that matter. And within the moments that matter, there are aha moments. And those ahas are where you are differentiating your product and truly giving the prospect or customer that kind of differentiated experience. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, people, I always say that salespeople were like the closest thing to athletes in the business world, because when it's showtime, what the behaviors that you exhibit at that key moment determine what the outcome is, right? You can walk into a sales call ready to buy and have a negative experience with a salesperson that makes you think, maybe this organization is not the right one. I need to look someplace else, right? And so we know that these critical touch points with customers lead to various outcomes. And so what we want to do is identify those critical touch points and then make sure that the team is ready to perform at the highest level when they come around. Or, that's how you lead to lower than desirable conversion rates.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving if we can, just to make sure we get one or two more, because miraculously the chat started to get hot. Matthew, you were next up. For CSMs to be successful and consistently drive impact, what is considered best practice for number of accounts they should be assigned to? I think, David, you started to answer that in the chat, but can you just chime in there really quickly for us?
Yeah, absolutely. In some organizations, it's feasible for a CSM to have 25 or 30 accounts, maybe. It also depends if you're talking enterprise versus mid-market and what the size is. But the complexity of the product is really important to understand also, and the types of users that you have. I would say focus on, one of the things we talked about during the presentation is that companies sometimes want to jump directly to org design and they want to set their ratios, their CSM to customer ratio, right? I would say take a step back, look at the customer journey and those critical moments. Make sure that after those are defined, you're setting your org structure and your ratios to allow enough time to do all of those tasks well, right? What you don't want to do is say, okay, I understand the value of executive business reviews at the enterprise level, and we need to do that, but I'm going to give the CSM 400 accounts, right? A CSM with 400 accounts is never going to be able to drive the right level of engagement or do a successful executive business review with 400 accounts. So I would say start by thinking about the tasks and making sure that you understand what work has to go into the task. We call those in-stage actions, right? align on what those are, agree to what those are, figure out how much time it should take to do those things, and then build your ratios around that, because the ratio is truly going to vary from company to company.
And once you do that, you say on each account, I need to spend 40 hours a quarter. And then how much, break down how much time does the CS has throughout a quarter to support, and then you just divide that, and then you get your book of business, as we call it. Mm-hmm. Right? Usually what we see, a lot of companies look at what's the average, 80, 120, 250. That's what I need to build. And we believe that you need to build it bottom up. What is the right what is the right customer journey post-acquisition? What resources do you need to support that journey?
And one other thing I would caution you on is a lot of companies will build their book of business based on revenue, right? Revenue is important in the sense that you don't want to allocate more time than the money you're going to be getting. But to say that you're building a book of business on $25,000 or $2.5 million of revenue, if you have a highly complex product and the average customer is $25,000 versus you have a very simple product and the average customer is $75,000, let's say, right? It's going to really impact. I think you should build your book of business on the number of accounts and not necessarily a revenue level, just as a guide.
All right, well, I think now is probably a good time to wrap. I'm always preferring to give people a minute or two back versus taking a minute or two out of the next meeting they have. Again, please feel free to reach out if there's any additional conversations you want to have. I can definitely be the conduit to getting follow-up discussions with Victor, Rowie, or David. Please let us be a resource for you as you are working through this, whether it's in your organization or with your portfolio. And thank you all so much for your time today. Enjoy the rest of the week.